Welcome to How to Trust Your Intuition, the podcast, the place where we learn that trust is earned and not given, even with ourselves. I'm your host, Betsy LaFay. I'm a social worker, turned award-winning psychic medium, turned intuition teacher. And my school, Trust Yourself Intuition School, celebrated its 10th anniversary in 2023. Join us each episode as we interview thought leaders and luminaries in every genre. They talk about how and when they learn to trust their intuition. Most say they're still learning. What happens when they do trust it and what happens when they don't. Stick around as we all walk together down the road towards trusting our intuition. It is a joy to bring to the show Dr. Emily Colwell. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
So lovely to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. We have a lot in common. We have a lot in alignment about how we see things and help people. So what can you tell our audience, especially if they're brand new to you, who you are, your gifts that you express in the world, and how you can help them?
Sure. So I am a naturopathic doctor and a clinical social worker. And, I practiced as a clinical social worker solely for 10 years. And then I went to naturopathic medical school and practiced addressing physical health for another, 15 years or so. And then I ended up realizing that I wanted to go back to a focus on emotional health. And so I still practice naturopathic medicine, but with a focus on emotional health.
Okay.
Because it turns out that plays a very big role in our physical health.
Yes.
And when we leave that part out, it doesn't serve people in the same way. So, so I deal with a lot of people who are navigating stress and anxiety. And, I've had anxiety my whole life, and it was really my enemy for the majority of my life until my 40s, when I started to understand it a little differently. And I started to understand that I am not anxiety, but I have a part of me that is anxiety that shows up. And I changed my relationship with it over time, so that instead of it being like, oh my God, I didn't master this again, when it would show up, it would be like, oh, Harry, it's you again. Okay, there's room for you here. And the fight stopped being such a fight, such a war inside, which honestly creates, our nervous system into the fight or flight all the time. And that's really changed my relationship with myself and with my intuition. And that's what I help other people do, is learn how to come back home to themselves and meet the whole variety of parts that we have inside of us, and, discover all the ways that those parts have been trying to help us.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes they're doing it in ways that are not so helpful now, they were at some point. And when I help people learn how to change their relationship with with these parts of themselves, and come back home to themselves, it changes their experience, because we're not ever going to get rid of stress. And a lot of us aren't ever going to fully get rid of anxiety. But when we can change our relationship and experience with it, that's a game changer.
Well, I have a few questions there. Thank you for sharing all of that. I can experientially go back in my mind and body and feel what it feels like to reduce or shift my relationship to anxiety. And for people who haven't, let's say you in your late 30s, we might be able to hear the words. We might be able to want it to be possible. Maybe some of us believe it, some of us don't. But it is if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to, So kind of because of that, and because of the way our culture sort of really likes to see and be entertained and learn things. So I get that there was probably, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably sort of like a a larger internal shift for you and then working on it to shift your relationship with anxiety, right?
Totally.
And we're still working on it. My question is, so there was that big change and a continuing change on the inside. What shifted on the outside around that time? Like, what were people's reactions, relationships, I guess, specifically, not just romantic, but you change on the inside and we know the outside changes. And, I know for me and, a lot of, at least America, we want the change on the outside, right? So this can also but also we're fearful of it, right? So I'd just love to hear about that part.
Yeah. I think what I repeatedly find is that the change happens on the inside first, and it happens sort of incrementally, which is often annoying in the beginning because you want results on the outside, right?
Well, the way I say it is even with me, I've had tiny bits of body dysmorphia because I'm an American and I am in a female body, right? But in general, I don't have it. But if I'm losing weight or if I'm gaining weight, I can't see it in the mirror day to day. And I feel like it's the same thing with what you're talking about with the internal shifts, the tiny baby, feel a tiny less anxious. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me with anxiety for so long, it was, oh my God, what do I have to do to get rid of this? What do I have to do to stop this, to make it go away? And, I'm saying anxiety, but it could be any number of unwanted feelings that we all have, right? Where that's our human response. It's kind of
anger, fear, sadness, shame, guilt.
And I'll give you an example of how the incremental internal shifts started happening, because it's kind of like this little dance that was happening on the inside. So make a fist. Mm-hmm. And that fist represents whatever the heck is here right now that is so unwanted, whether it's anxiety, grief, fear, anger, whatever it is. And, or, something that you're doing that drives you crazy, like overeating or, whatever. And take your other hand and try to pry that fist open to get that out of there, to make it go away, to fix it, and see how your fist responds.
I'm doing it right now, folks. I hope you are too. It's not working.
Yeah, no, the fist tightens.
Yeah.
Right. And this hand is working harder and harder. And this, as humans, this is what we do as humans. When we are in pain or discomfort, our natural human response is like, oh my God, we got to get out of this or fix it. Mm-hmm. So it's not that we're ever going to get rid of this response, but it's possible to start to create a new one that's a possibility too. So now take your other hand, keep the fist, it represents all the same stuff, and just gently hold your fist. Ooh. And notice how your fist responds.
I just almost immediately wants to let go into that relax.
Yeah. And it may not fly open and dance around. But and what I want you to notice is nothing's changed about this fist. It's all exactly the same. And yet this presence, we're just being present with it and acknowledging that it's here. And it feels different. And so the experience is suddenly different. And so that's what it's been like for me and for so many people that I know when you learn how to do this dance. And the most amazing part about it is you never have to learn this dance perfectly. You're never going to. That's part of being human, right? And so you're going to find yourself in this lots of times. But then when you start practicing this, oh, wait, I'm in the fight. Okay, let me just be here with this. And something feels different. And, we're talking about neural pathways here, right?
Yes.
Because this is a very strong neural pathway that we have. Right.
So holding of the fist and trying to pull it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And neural pathways are like our response, these habit responses that our brains and bodies have. And, some people watching may know what neural pathways are. Others may have heard of it. I kind of equate it to, if you go walking in the woods and there's a path that's been used by many for a long time, you're going to go following that path. The most people would not just walk off into the brush, right? Some people I've talked to tell me, yes, I would. So, for those of you, bravo. But for many, people are going to follow the path, right? But say you hear that there's this amazing thing in the center of the woods and there's not a path there. So you take the chance and you start walking off in there and you find it and you're like, oh my God, I'm coming back here. And you keep coming back. So when you get to that where the path is a well-worn path and this new path, this one's not well-worn yet. So most people are not going to take that. But as you keep doing it, it becomes more well-worn. And then suddenly there is a day where people are like, should I go left or right? Because both paths are well-worn. And that's what happens in our brains with these neural pathways, is we have this response that's a very well-worn response. But when we start practicing this, it turns out we can do this response for only 1 or 2 seconds, and it begins to form a new pathway.
So you're sometimes we're just on audio, not on video. So
got it. Yes.
So sometimes, just to say that whole thing again, sometimes we just do this and what people get.
So sometimes when we're having the normal human response to unwanted feelings, like fighting it and trying to get rid of it, fix it, make it go away, that is a well-worn response. But when we shift to just being present with it and just noticing, what does it feel like in my body right now to be feeling this anxiety? Can I say hi to this anxiety? Just acknowledge that it's here. Not do anything, but acknowledge that it's here. Let it know that I'm here too. And when we do that pause, that micro moment pause to acknowledge that, even if we do it for 1 or 2 seconds, that's beginning to form a new pathway. And you never have to do that constantly for that pathway to keep growing. You can do it, you can mess up and forget about it a bunch of times. Then when you do it again, it's furthering that pathway. And in the beginning, you're not going to see the difference on the outside. But there comes a time as you practice this where all of a sudden you're going to face that same kind of situation or feeling, and you're going to watch yourself having a different response to it. And your jaw is going to drop open. And you're going to think, I can't believe that just happened. But that's because you were working on this new pathway, I
just love everything you have to say. I want to take a million tangents, but we're not going to. But what I will say is, when you were, first of all, I'm going to run with that example of the fist because, and the neural pathways in the woods are what I've been talking about in readings for 15 years. The fist analogy, which is not only is it an analogy, also accurate, but it is an embodied, right? You're using that's what is different, because it's been coming up. It always comes up, but a lot of times it comes up as like either a Chinese finger trap, which is the same thing that you're talking about.
Yep.
And the other cool thing that I was thinking about while you were talking about this, you were referring to, resisting your own emotions in some way, right?
Yeah.
There's everything that you talked about, and just, holding space for it, acknowledging it, staying calm in the face of something else that's not feeling so good, works with relationships outside of yourself as well, because those same analogies come up with like a tug of rope, right? Like if I just let go of this pull on this rope with someone, then there's nothing there to resist. If I just, there's no tug of rope, what's going on? Let's just be here.
Curiosity.
I love that. This is going to live on, and I'm going to say,
I just love it too because it captures it so well.
So great. So great. This is a really good segue into one of the only questions that I had.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes, of course.
One thing that I want to go back to, so that anyone listening isn't left feeling that they have to just find a way to just be present with their feelings. It's really about building tolerance, because there are times when sitting and being present with your anxiety in your body will feel intolerable. And so that's why I'm talking about the micro moment,
right?
And even doing it for 1 or 2 seconds and then going back to whatever response you need to have. Because as you start practicing that over time, that 1 or 2 seconds shifts to 3 or 4 to 5 to a few minutes, and you build tolerance. But I really want people to hear that it's important not to try and force yourself to sit in a feeling that feels intolerable for any length of time.
Well, that's so nice. And I'm so glad you repeated the 1 to 2 seconds, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that it only took that amount of time. And of course it makes sense. You walk down that path for 1 to 2 seconds, you're going to make a little bit of a mark,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
So great. That's really, really great. And of course, for people just not on YouTube, when you're like, most people just don't go off the path. I ardently raise my hand. I'm like, I do.
I do. I always have people who are like, I always go off the path. So it only works for some.
I've said this in the show before. I have people that care about me that are tracking my whereabouts all the time, because I'm single, and also I like to go hiking, and I'll text them where I'm going hiking and when I'll come back and when I'll text them again, even though they have my GPS. And right after we established this safety practice, I met them in person. I was like, so this is the park I've been going to, but any park I go to, if there is an emergency, look off the path. Look by the lake, look by the canyons, look, it may not just be right on the path, just so you know. So
renegade. We got a renegade here.
Well, and this it's not little, it's actually a huge crystal that I'm pointing to if you happen to be on YouTube. This crystal here it's interesting, because you were like, what if you knew that there was something amazing in the woods? Well, I knew with my intuition, straight up, that's all, that there was something amazing in the middle of the woods. And I walked straight up to this gigantic crystal.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's got actually a heart on it made of crystal.
Oh, isn't it the best?
Yeah, it's really, that was amazing. So it's interesting. I don't know if we need to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm really curious. I'm going to try to do this without a leading question, without leading in.
Right, let's see.
I mean, I'm sort of am, but without too much. So on your website, I love how you worded this, just taking a little bit part of it. I show you how to turn down the volume of your anxious mind and practice tuning into your own feelings, your own body, and your own energy. Because when you do this, it taps you into a place where you can't reach with your thinking mind. Now, my reason for bringing this up is because you have own feelings, own body, own energy. Now, I have 2 sentences that I could say after that, but I'm going to hear your response first. So, if you went on to, I have Grammarly to help me with my grammar, right?
Really great. Yeah.
It would tell you to take out own all 3 times. It would correct it to say, I show you, by tuning into your feelings, your body, and your energy instead of your own. So can you tell me why you choose to put your own in there each time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm an empath, or many would call me that. And, I grew up with a lot of different challenges and some dysfunction and sexual abuse. And I got super good at feeling other people's feelings. And so, in terms of intuition, my intuition about other people's feelings has been on fire for a very long time. But it turns out, and I find this for many people who are empaths, our ability to tune into our own feelings, our own body, all of that is not so, it's not on fire in the same way, it's kind of shut down. And so that's what I mean by coming back home to ourselves, because, whether you're an empath or not, our culture really fosters, all of us being, doing and accomplishing. And so in order to do that and to keep trying to keep up in that way, it does, on many levels, it requires that we disregard ourselves. disregard our own intuition, disregard our own feelings, our own body, And so as a result, we're running around tuning into everybody else's feelings, and not our own. Mm-hmm. And so we're not home. Mm-hmm. We're not home.
You're all ready for your vacation. It's really hectic getting here, but you're seated in your airplane seat, looking out the window, and you hear the pilot come on the intercom. Good day, everyone. It's a beautiful day outside, 71 and sunny. As you're aware, to get to where we're going, we need to fly over that mountain range, and sometimes there can be a little bit of turbulence. I'm about 80% sure we'll get there safely. So buckle up, relax, and enjoy your flight. I know that sounds like an absurd situation, but when I put this in context of trusting yourself and trusting your intuition, and I ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, how much do you trust yourself? 8 is a very high score when asking people. So if you fall on a 2 to 4 range, you're totally not alone. Now picture this other scenario. You're out to lunch with a friend, and the friend says that they've been having a really difficult time learning French. You ask the logical question, are you taking a class? And their answer is, well, I'm taking Spanish. Guess what? If you want to trust yourself deeply, if you want to have an easier time making decisions, break through blocks, connect with people, know who to connect with when, there's a class for that. I've actually helped thousands of people truly trust themselves in uncertainty, in times of doubt or fear, shame or guilt. And I have a free masterclass called Intuition 101, How to Trust Yourself in Uncertain Times, that will tell you everything you need to know in order to learn to trust yourself. The link is in the show notes. However, you can also go to howtotrustYourIntuition.com, all spelled out.
And so that's why I used the word own so many times, because if you take the word own out of that sentence, it's like, yeah, okay, makes sense. But it doesn't drive home coming in here. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. So I wanted to hear all of that because it's very important for us to hear. And of course, I agree. And again, being this business owner for 15 years and having the website copy and everything. And my mission has always been to effectively have other people tune into their own feelings so that they never need basically like another intuitive. We need people all the time, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
And it brought me back to, so I'm currently healing from CPTSD, right? So it's a very, very long journey, but so it brought me back to, I was in this abusive marriage. We wound up, he was a narcissist, and of course I didn't know it, but we wound up being business partners. And as the story usually goes, he wound up becoming my everything because that's part of the formula. Yeah. And I would always put the own in there. And this is before we had Grammarly, and he would always be taking it out. And of course, just kind of like any other story goes, like at first I would sort of put up the argument, right? Just like not even an argument, just an explanation kind of in the beginning. Like, and then eventually I was just like, whatever, it's one word, you obviously. So then it's interesting because Grammarly is amazing. I don't get sponsored by Grammarly, right?
There are times when it wants to take something else that's a nuance that adds to the feeling. Yeah.
And Grammarly is not a narcissist. Grammarly just does not know about this. But what was interesting as I was reflecting on that, because at very first, my feelings about being suppressed by a person narcissist that I was married to, those feelings went to Grammarly because Grammarly was doing the same action. I was like, oh, Grammarly's a narcissist. I was like, no, they really just don't know. But then I reflected and I was like, wow, both of them have a lack of knowledge and experience of the everything that you said following why you were using the word own had to do with being an empath. And it's no surprise that the narcissist was trying to gaslight, right, this experience out.
Totally.
So I'm just that's like a celebration for me, this whole thing. I'm like, wow, she's got it like 3 times in one sentence. And I know why, because it means something different. It really changes the meaning of it.
Yay, I love it. I love it. It's so
fascinating.
I know sometimes I just have to say, Grammarly, I know you want that taken up, but it's staying in. It's staying in.
Yeah. Still learning. We're teaching it. Well, I'd love to get into the questions. So when and how, even if you're still learning, you learn to trust your intuition.
I don't think that it was just overnight. I think it's been a real process. And, in my 20s, I was chronically ill for 9 years, and my body was like my enemy. It was betraying me. And I didn't see any of my symptoms as, intuitive or guidance or anything. It was getting in my way. And so I would just disregard it and keep going. And, fast forward, and I really over time started learning how to come back home to myself and what the heck I was feeling, and in that process, I really became friends with my body. That's not to say that I never have upset feelings about my body, because there are times when I do, and then I make space for that too eventually after I fight it for a while. But when I started to make friends with it more over time, that was the way that I started to tune into my intuition,
Wow.
To be able to feel it.
Yeah. What prompted you to make friends? That's a shift. What?
It's a big shift. I think I don't know. I think it was there's just something that happened where I started, like I have dizziness periodically that comes in. And years ago, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room. My dad was having heart surgery, and it was very up in the air. And I was sitting there with my mom, and all of a sudden, the dizziness just slammed into me. And, historically, my response would be, oh my God, what is it gonna, and I would just get pissed and say all kinds of mean things. And it would be a fight. And I instead found myself saying, it's okay. It's okay. I'm right here. I can feel this dizziness. I'm right here with you. And I was talking to it like this dizziness was another part of me that was showing up, that lives in me, right? I said, I'm right here. It's okay. And I'm not exaggerating. Like within 2 minutes, the dizziness went away. And that never, ever, ever happened. When it would come, it would be there for days or weeks, And I was like, what the hell just happened? Because the relationship, I was talking to it differently, and it responded. And, if I'm on a walk with my dog and my knee starts hurting, my first response is more of the hand and fist response of fighting it. And then I'm like, oh no, hey, oh yeah, you're really hurting right now. I can feel that. Okay, well, let's see if it feels okay to keep walking or if we need to turn around. And sometimes my knee will lighten up. Other times it won't. And I'll say, okay, let's go home, and it's just a different relationship that's happened. And so I think, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it really, really does. I wind up at different times, sometimes when things are difficult or stressful or just, random times, I wind up saying some of those things out loud. Even in public too, like at this point,
Oh, totally. Me too.
As I've always been the weirdo, now, realizing and accepting being on the autism spectrum and ADD and the CPTSD. I'm just like, you know what? I got all these get out of jail free cards to be even freakier. So let's be me. But yeah, I think that's beautiful. What I heard from what you were sharing is it's interesting because when we talk to kids and acknowledge their needs, there doesn't necessarily have to be a kid tone. Like you can be appropriate with kids, like any age, and you can literally just be your adult self, but just, and the way that you were talking to your knee, for example, was you could have been talking to a 2-year-old, or you could have been talking to a 96-year-old, or you could have been talking to your wife. And it would have been appropriate, all of those tones, and all of them would have been like, wow, she cares about me. Let me just see if I want to keep walking or if I just want to go on. I'm going to be supported no matter what. It's neutral. We're going to be accepted either way. And I just thought it's an example of what's really growing in people's consciousness now. Like if you treated yourself the way you treated other people, kind of thing.
I know, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Wow.
And the first step in that sometimes is to for micro moments at a time, notice the language that you're using to yourself, because it's so invisible to us, so much of the time, the horrible things we're saying to ourselves, and so to start even just starting to notice that is powerful. And, then steps come to start playing for little tiny moments with trying it a different way.
I think I'm gonna make it a tiny bit more specific. I don't usually give homework assignments, but this is like this, not to you, but like the audience, like try this. No matter where you are, you may think you're so far away from loving or accepting your body, or shifting anxiety or depression or anger or whatever it is, right? But for a micro moment, try being nice to yourself. And it could even be like, instead of telling yourself you cleaned the floor terribly, you could just be like, you did it a tiny bit better than last time, which would be even like slightly better. Like you're not pumping yourself up out of nowhere. You're not like, I am the sexiest beast alive. If like you hate what's going on right now, you're just like, you know what? Like if a friend came to you and said, I hate my body, what's one thing that you could say nice to them, right? And it's like, okay, can you say that to yourself? Because sometimes it's like so hard, even for that first micro moment, right? Like to figure it out.
Totally. The other thing that I will mention is it can be really helpful to even just acknowledge that you're hating your body.
Thank you.
Because,
yes.
It's like when I was first going through menopause, so many things were changing and it was upsetting. And my brain for months got obsessed with every ad on Instagram and Facebook is like a cream that's going to make everything be different, or something that's going to do something with your body, etc. And I was in this fix it mode of like, what's going to fix this? And it was miserable. And I was hating my body. And then there was a day when I was walking through the mall, where I don't go very often, but I was walking through the mall and I was looking at, in the windows, and I thought, oh gosh, I love that outfit. And then I thought, who are you kidding? You can't wear those kinds of clothes anymore. It was like that kind of thing. And suddenly I realized, oh, okay, I just have to accept that I'm really, really not liking my body right now. This is what it feels like not to like my body. And I noticed like what the sensations were inside my body while I wasn't liking it. There was a heaviness. There was even a feeling of disgust. And I just made space for that to be okay in that moment. That this is what's visiting right now. This part of me that's like, ugh, is visiting right now. And I'm just going to make space for this part to be here. And I'm not kidding when I put down the fight about it.
Yeah.
It was, I went from this to this with the hand, and just holding space for the fact that, and within a couple days, the grip that it had on me softened, and I don't mean that I then was like, just like this, but it was not a war anymore.
Right. All right. If you feel comfortable sharing, I would love to hear some Cliff's notes about your journey through peri and menopause, because there's two reasons. One, I'm 43, and a month ago or less than, I had my first hot flash, and and I've talked to people about this, and they're not in perimenopause, so they're younger, and no one has heard anything about either one of these phases. No one has, in real life or even on a podcast with real people, ever heard any information about hot flashes. All we've seen is on TV or the movies. And I said to my therapist, who's 10 years younger than me, I'm 43, and I was like, it is like the movies, because that woman comes in and they play it off as like slapstick. She's the most insane woman in that moment ever, and it's the truth. So I wound up running to get evening primrose oil, and it saved my life. But since then, I've heard the word menopause in like my podcast listening feed like once or twice. And I know that there's like specific resources out there, but in my knowledge, this is like the new phase of like, you know, how people were like, I didn't know this happened when you gave birth, and people didn't know about postpartum depression at all. I feel like perimenopause and menopause, like this is the new wave of like, hey, we need to know what's coming here. So any kind of Cliff's notes that you have, obviously it's not a whole show about it, but like, you're like, I hated this and I hated this. I was like, tell me what it is, you know? Like,
yeah.
So,
you know, there's not going to be one specific Cliff note for it, because everybody experiences it differently. Hot flashes are common.
Well, even that's good to know that everyone is different.
Yeah. And some people will have very irregular periods. Some people will have irregular periods where they'll go really long and heavy. Some people, they'll start having them really light and very far apart. Hot flashes. Yes. I remember getting my first one and thinking, why do I feel so prickly and hot?
Yeah.
And red, you know? Sometimes people will have hot flashes for a window where they sweat a lot, and then they'll just get, have a time where they don't. Some people sweat every time they have hot flashes. Some people never sweat with hot flashes, but feel like an oven inside. For some people, it impacts their sleep. For some people, it doesn't. For some people, they'll gain weight during menopause. For some people, they don't. So, and the good news is that there are so many things that can be done to help with it. And it's like different levels of intervention. And you start with the lowest, and, dietary things can make a difference. Herbs and supplements can make a difference. Cycling certain kinds of seeds and oils can make a difference. And then, bump it up, as things work to hormones and all that.
Look, you just gave a bird's eye view, but I feel like even what you just said, first of all, my nervous system relaxed a little bit, and you relaxed a little bit. You didn't even give specific information, but I feel like what you just said for so many listeners is more than what they've ever heard, probably.
Good.
So, yeah. So that's just, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm just really lucky that I got to a place of loving and accepting my body before I got here. So, I know that like nothing's foolproof, but I feel,
but yeah, if you already have that baseline, that's so great. That's so helpful.
When I graduated with a BA in psychology in 2002, attachment work was only applied to children. Now, in 2023, it seems to be all the rage for a reason, because knowing your attachment type, there are three main types: avoidant, anxious, and secure, really changes your life. And if you listen to the podcast where I talked about how I lost $100,000 from a spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual coach, the silver lining to that experience was me discovering the root of a lot of my issues. I was anxiously attached. I had anxious attachment. At the very end of that terrible, terrible situation, yes, it was traumatic, I came across Maya Diamond's work. And it was working through her program that literally rewired my brain from anxious to secure. This is how I made it through all of my major transitions over the past 2 years and discovered so much about myself. Now, if you don't know about attachment work, don't feel bad. Here's a typical situation, in fact, the most common situation that happens with these attachment styles. Person A and person B are in a relationship. They care about one another. Person A reaches out to person B, doesn't hear back right away. So then maybe sends another text or another gesture, which further pushes person B away. Both people get resentful, and eventually they might break up. I was in that situation more often than I'd like to remember. I married the wrong person, I had toxic family relationships, and had no idea until I took Maya's program. So, the link for a free consultation is in the show notes, and I'm so happy to offer it all the podcast listeners. If you sign up for her program, you will get a free session worth $500 with Maya Diamond herself, one-on-one. That's just for How to Trust Your Intuition podcast listeners. Do you have a time that you could talk about where possibly your intuition told you to do something or not to do something, and you ignored it? You ignored what your intuition said. You did the opposite, and what happened?
There are probably 100 million examples I could come up with, but there's one that sticks out in my mind because it really, really drove home for me trusting myself.
By taking the wrong, well, not cool, but by not following your intuition.
It was an intuition hit that I then tried to ignore.
Yeah. This is one of the best ways to learn. That's great.
Yeah. When I birthed my oldest, she was only a few days old, and a couple we were friends with came by the house to, say hi and meet her and all that. And we loved this couple, loved them. And for some strange reason, at that time is what I was thinking, the entire time they were there, I kept hearing this voice saying, you can never leave her alone with him. You can never leave her alone with him. And I, the whole time was saying, give me a break, Emily. Like, this is your friend. And so when they left, I said to my wife, I have no idea why I kept hearing this, but it was very clear to me, we can never leave her alone with him. And she was like, whoa. Okay. And she was like, that's wild. But then I spent the next 4 years, and we did not leave her alone with him, but I spent the next 4 years telling myself that it was simply because I'd had my own sexual abuse.
Right. You were gaslighting yourself.
Sensitive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, and my wife in the meantime was believing it the whole time. But me, I was trying to talk myself out of it. And then 4 years later, we found out that he was a chronic pedophile.
Yeah.
And for years and years and years. And that was just like a marker to me. And so it just really drove home that even when it doesn't make sense, I have to trust, not just in regard to something like this, but in other ways too. It's not always going to make sense in the moment.
No.
And sometimes that's tricky.
Yeah. And this is a good example. I mean, it's a major example. I'm not saying it's a good, situation, but it's a good example of wishing it weren't true. Like you said, it doesn't make sense. That's the definition of intuition, having no logical information to back it up. But you also, like, as you said, you loved these people, they were your neighbors or your friends, and you're just like, I wouldn't want this to be true. Like, and also you don't want to, especially as sensitive empaths who care about other people, we don't want, even internally to ourselves or in our family to our wives, right? Like, paint a picture of somebody, as a criminal or who is sick
Right.
if they're not, right?
Right.
But that is a very good example. It's interesting. I find there's like this is totally a gross generalization, but
Yeah.
I find there's people who have been touched by sexual abuse in the past, and I'm not even saying directly because I have it through ancestry and close friendships, so I have that secondary trauma, right? And also it was like in the womb, right? So but we have people in that category who kind of can pick it up in a second, and whether or not they believe it, in your case, like they can name it, right? Then there's also people in that category who we're not ready to see it, right? Like we're always blind to it. So the people who let their kids, not let, but wind up having their kids be abused because they can't see it, right? And then I find like that there's other category of people maybe who haven't been touched. There's probably more in that category, but I'm kind of less familiar with the people who haven't, like, who hasn't been touched ancillarily, but in that population who maybe are rather clueless, but are kind of immune as well, right? Because there's like they're not open. They're like, there's a little creep in that kind of person, but we're just gonna not even think about it, right? And then it's really wild. But I feel for everybody, but especially the people who pick it up but then gaslight themselves or
I know, and that's what we've
back in that
been taught to
situation.
do,
And I just want to add one more thing, because this is, people who listen to this are going through this, have or will. A lot of times this winds up being family members instead of neighbors. And it is extraordinarily hard, but sometimes needs to happen where you do not allow that person near your children ever, right? So you don't go to the same family events as them. And it's bold, it's wild, but it's necessary for safety. And I just want to call it out. Like, sometimes that needs to happen. I had a friend that needed to have that happen, and I was so impressed. Somebody she loved dearly and loved spending time with, and was just like, never again.
Oh, I know, it's heartbreaking.
But it's important that we talk about these truths. How about a time, big or small, doesn't matter, large impact, not, where your intuition set against logic, about something, and you did trust it. You did take that leap and go forward with it, and what happened?
Again, I think there are a lot of them, but there was one, I guess it was like 5.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And a diagnosis, they suspected that it was aggressive. And when I first found out, it was shocking, and I shook for hours. And then I started to realize that how much my thyroid had been doing on my behalf since I was in my mom's womb, that I had
never alive?
thought about before. I had never even thought about my thyroid or appreciating it. And in that process of that experience, I honestly fell in love with my thyroid. And it was an interesting experience because...
Wait, I just have, you just said this, but I have to reiterate. You got thyroid cancer, and you started to realize how much your thyroid was doing it. And through this process, you fell in love with the very organ that was cancerous.
I fell in love with my cancerous thyroid.
Go on. Yes, please.
Totally.
Yes.
I had a Thywell party for her before she headed out. And the interesting part of that experience, it's not that I just walked through that experience just in a love affair. There were lots of ups and downs, and I did a lot of that, what we talked about with the hand and the fist of, fighting it and then making space for whatever the feelings were that were coming up. But one of the things that ended up being so different, and it wasn't intentional, but everywhere I turned, people were talking to me like this cancer was my enemy. And my intuition was not having that experience with it. And so it was an interesting experience, because every time I talked to somebody and they said, you're going to beat this, my whole brain would almost explode with confusion, because it wasn't how I was feeling about it. But I didn't go into having cancer planning that. It was not part of my plan. But I think all these things that have happened over the years of like talking to my dizziness, talking to my knee, talking to my parts, were preparing me for this. And at one point I had strep, so my surgery had to get changed, and I was pissed about it. And then I was starting to feel better after antibiotics, and I was dancing around the house a little, and all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, I have to dance with my cancer cells. Like, I could just feel it was like I'm supposed to dance with my cancer. So I was dancing around my family room with my cancer cells. And I suddenly realized those cells are literally just confused cells. They're confused cells. That's what cancer cells are. And
that's their message, right? Yes. That's what they're saying. Yes.
And of course I'm going to have some confused cells, because I've had lots of confusion in my life from a lot of different things.
Wait, I want to hear you go on, but I want to, again, just like highlight this a little bit. I absolutely love what you said, because biologically, we can say cancer cells are confused cells. And then when we bring it into this mind-body connection, as you're talking about, it's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. These are confused cells. And I'm talking to my knee. Like there's, I have to say, what is it you're saying? And love every part of us that quote goes wrong is giving us a message. People without pain have really big problems. So it's a good thing. So go on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then I was about
dancing with their cancer. It's amazing.
Yeah. And that's what I realized. And the other thing that I realized is I went to the gym shortly after I was diagnosed, and I was trying to work out, and I was like dragging, and I was thinking, oh, great. Now you're identifying too much with your cancer. And then all of a sudden I heard a voice say to me, Emily, health is pouring through you right now. It's pouring through you. And the thing just like that, I realized, oh my God, okay, so I have cancer in my body right now. And yet there are 100 million other things that are working so well. And it was like such a paradigm shift for me,
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this love affair that was not a war with my cancer. And I'm not, and I just want to be clear, because I've had some very close friends who've lost, one lost their son to cancer. Others have lost family members. This was my experience. This is not going to be everybody's experience. I in no way am saying that anybody with cancer should fall in love with their cancer and not have it be their enemy. But this was just my experience. And and the wild thing is that when it was removed, it was almost 3 times smaller than it was a diagnosis. And again, that was not and it was not aggressive.
Yeah. Wow.
Aggressive. So it was that was a time when my intuition, do you know what I mean? Like it went against what I was hearing from everything around me. But I was able to stay with knowing that it was true.
When you describe like everyone saying like, you should fight this, and you're like, everything just got so confused. I was like, oh, you're describing my life, like in every aspect.
Yeah,
like,
it is. It's disorienting when that happens, right?
Yeah, it is. What brought to mind about like loving your cancer cells and dancing with them, George Carlin's famous quote is, fighting for peace is like fucking for virginity. You can't do it, or if we go to Martin Luther King, right? Like darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Yeah. Right. And I do find, I think, people can try this. It's not a catch-all. Nothing is going to work all the time for everything. But if you're in this process, if you're like trying these things out that Dr. Emily's talking about, if you are walking and you feel your knee, or you've been diagnosed with breast cancer or something, you can over time not only hold space for that, but you can ask the cancer what it's confused about, or what it's holding on to, or what its feelings are, or what needs to be heard, or what needs to be felt, or what needs to be let go of. It's not going to be instant. It's not going to be, and that does require slowing down and holding that tight fist and all of those things. But when you're in that space, you can you can enter into conversation, and the conversation might be like talking to your breast and be like, what are you confused about? And you just might be overcome with 30 years of grief from when your innocence was stolen when you were 6, right? Like that might be the message. And you don't need to sort of question it further. This has just been, man, I feel like we could just, let's have like just a get together. I'd love to meet your wife. We'll go out into the woods for a week and have some fun. And
we'll take the non-path.
Yes. We'll find some more crystals in the woods, and maybe we'll find a cool skull or two. You never know.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. This is amazing. I'd love for you to share with our audience where they can follow you, find you, and also where you could help them, like what specifically you could help them with and how.
Okay. So you can find me on my website at Dr. Emily Colwell, COLWELL.com.
Mm-hmm.
And also on Instagram at Dr.Emily_Colwell.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also, I have a free gift on my website it's called a micro moment reset audio, and people can download that, and I take you through, it's kind of a form of guided meditation that is one of many ways that I help people to go from, I'm showing my fist right now and trying to break my fist open and how it's fighting, and then taking my hand and putting it under the fist and having the fist relax. And this micro moment reset is a way to do that when you're navigating any kind of unwanted feeling or experience.
Wonderful.
So you can find that on my website, dremilycolwell.com//free gift.
Excellent. That's so nice. I hope people will run out and get that. I think it's necessary. Like I do that all the time, but there's more tools that I can always get. So I'm going to give it a try with y'all too. Yeah. Well, this has been super excellent. I hope this is just the beginning between us. Thank you for being here.
This was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay.
How to Trust Your Intuition, the podcast, is written, produced, and created by me, your host, Betsy LaFay. Music provided by Ben Talmy. If you don't want to be like that pilot that is 80% sure you'll get to your next destination safely, and you want to take the right class to learn the right language, and guess what? Intuition is a language. Head over to howtotrustyourintuition.com. I hope this podcast has been helpful to you. If it has, please forward it to a friend who you think it could also make a difference for. There's something that you can do for me and everyone else who listens to this podcast as well. If you hit subscribe, you'll never miss another episode. It'll also help the show get to other people. And of course, I know you've heard other podcast hosts say this before, but it's totally true. If you leave us a 5-star rating and a review, it helps other people like you discover this podcast. We all need to learn to trust our intuition. So, hit subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and write a little blurb while you're there. Your intuition will thank you.